I'm just going to give the axe. I've had a lot of requests about the axe from another film about how I set the axe up. Actually, it has got a couple of nicks in it. And I'm just using this is quite a coarse diamond whetstone, as it's called, I suppose. Sliperstein it's called in Norwegian. Bryne. That's another name for it. I don't know if there's a difference between a sliperstein. Actually, a sliperstein is maybe the round wheel, and this is a bryne. Bryning is like making something sharp. Sharpening. We could start doing Norwegian lessons for builders. Well, I'm not going to be able to get those nicks out completely, and there's no point in doing that either. There are different ideas about sharpening axes. Some people like them to have quite a coarse edge, sharp but slightly coarse, because it gets slightly more bite. And in the absence of having the finer Arkansas stones for doing the polishing, then I'm quite happy just to use the coarse diamond. But it won't make it razor sharp. For that you need to, I use a black Arkansas stone. And this axe is beveled on both edges. I start doing much lighter when I've got the. I mean, I work quite a lot of the metal. They're quite aggressive, these diamond bryne. What is that in English? Whetstones. You don't want to be able to see daylight on the edge, that's for sure. I don't know. People say, you know, they want me to show how they do it, but I don't know if you can see it. I mean, how can you see what I can feel? And that's the thing, it's not just done with your eyes, this. It's also done with your fingers. And I can feel when I'm on the edge. I can feel when I'm doing it wrong. If I'm cutting, if I start to blunten it, I can actually feel. I can feel it. If I have the angle wrong and I'm too close to the edge. So it's not something you can teach. It just really is something that you have to learn how to do by being sensitive yourself to what's going on. There are some visual things that you can look for, like not seeing light on the edge and that you're making a lighter stripe. But I mean, I can't film that either, because the light has to fall on the axe in a certain way for you to see it. So that's why I move it when I'm working, because I'm reflecting the light on the surface to see where my action is working. But to be honest, I can do this with my eyes shut, really, because, well, that's probably a bit of a boastful thing to say, probably not true either, but a lot of it's got to do with the feel of it rather than the look of it, and that's just not something you can teach other people. They just have to learn it themselves. That is your experience. You have to make your own. You have to make your own experience. So anyway, there's a lot of babble. Talking. But now I can check it. Oh, that's very sharp. It's not razor sharp, but it's very, very sharp. So it's good enough. But this is you can get these in different colours, and they have the different coarseness grades. This is an American one. They're very, very expensive, these ones. I don't know really if they're any better than the slightly cheaper ones. I've got cheaper ones as well, they seem to work too, so I don't know. It does, I would say though that that American type there is the expensive type. It's lasted a long time. It still works after many years. And I've had that about 7 or 8 years probably. It still works. I use it quite a lot. So, and I don't think I can say that about the ones that I bought from the Far East. Alright, there you go. Lots of babble. Because I've been working on site last week in the rain, some of my tools have got a little bit of rust on them, and of course, as is always the case with restoring old buildings, it goes heavily on the tools. There's a lot of nails and stuff in the old materials. So before I start, I've got to set up this chisel. This diamond one is quite coarse. That's a child or a cat. Well, I like to do the whole face of chisels. Because then the quick fix on the building site is just to change the angle of the bevel, lift up the bevel slightly. But when I've got these tools that cut quickly, it's better to, I just like to get it set up like that. It's really, if I were in the workshop I would probably do it slightly differently, but a lot of the decisions are to do with making quick repairs when you're actually out on the building site, because I do most of my work on site. And this last little finishing process, I give it a little micro bevel just by lifting it up very, very slightly.
And then last, this is I think a black Arkansas. It's really a polishing tool. Don't know what grit it is, but it's certainly very fine because it looks like polished metal afterwards. So then I also lift up the bevel slightly at the end.
There's been a little bit of interest in how I set up my chainsaw. Well, I don't really like them when they're new because they have a slightly steeper angle. I think it might be 32 degrees when they're new, but I like it to be 28 degrees. It's more important for me that they're equally sharp rather than I'm not after. I don't need to have perfectly even riders and all of the things that you'd need if you were doing forestry work. I'm more interested in it being equally sharp on both sides of the cut. That's what keeps my cut straight. Just exactly how much wood is being thrown out by the saw, how quickly it cuts, that's actually not that important to me. I cut much more slowly than the saw is capable of, and have a much higher RPM than is needed to cut through this wood at that speed. That's all to do with making the cut very clean. You'll notice if you look at any of these films, there's very little rip out when I do this cutting, and that is to do with the way I sharpen the blade and the way I use the saw. So there's nothing random about how I'm using the saw. So if you're interested to learn how to do cutting like this with a chainsaw, watch very carefully. I'm not saying that the way I'm doing it is exactly perfect. I don't know, but it does work. It works for me, and the way I do it is very similar to the way that my colleagues do it. There's not much difference. And I don't know if that's because I learned from them how to do it or just because it is the way to do it. That's not the point. It's a fascinating subject, setting up chainsaws. And I'm sure that I've got a lot to learn as well. But for the sake of anyone who's interested, this is how I do it. So I'm looking for about a 28 degree angle and a nice, oh well, that's probably about it really. I mean, I don't know, I don't actually think that very much about it, I just do it. I let my body remember from one time to the next. If there's something wrong with the way I sharpen this, or if it hits something, or if I bump it on a piece of concrete or something, and I know at once when I start to cut, because it's just not as easy to use when it's not set up right. Well, I'm not taking very much off, I'm just literally giving it a slight new edge because I haven't hit anything bad, it's not really that blunt, and it was working very nicely on Friday, so it doesn't need much. The teeth, when you're doing restoration work like this, you hit nails from time to time, and you hit the ground sometimes, and it just means that you get an uneven wear on the chain. It's just normal. I just file it until it's sharp, and if it's on one side the teeth are shorter than on the other, that's just the way it is, because the chances are the next time I hit something it'll be on the other side, and so it evens up. This one's got a little nick in it, so literally I just get rid of that nick, and I don't care that it's a bit shorter than the others. If it starts to judder when I'm working, you know, as a consequence of having one much shorter than the others, then I might do some more work on it. Now I've never actually done these these bridges, is it they're called? I can't remember what they're called in English. I haven't actually done those ones yet. But as I said, I'm not interested in cutting through the wood very fast. On the contrary, I want to cut through the wood quite slowly, because I'm using this precision tool. You know, it's overpowered for the job in a way, but I like the extra power because that high speed of the chain, it kind of slips through the wood in a way that it makes everything much more stable. Anyway, as I say, there's nothing really random about it. The way I use the saw is very specific, it's very precise, and it's, you know, it's taken a long time to get to that, you know, to be able to use it that way. It takes a lot of practice actually. Years. I was years and years really of using the chainsaw before I got really comfortable with it, and I've used it a great deal when I was doing production timber building. Really a lot of hours, and you know, constant use, cutting the line scribing and stuff on timber houses. So loftehus, as they're called in Norwegian. So anyway, there we go. You know, there are fantastic experts on YouTube that have got really good channels about setting up saws. So just thought you would want to hear. Some of you at least want to know about these little details. I get sometimes comments, people saying it's easier than it looks or stuff, but it's not, I can assure you, it's actually very difficult. And I don't recommend you to try using a chainsaw as a carpentry tool, you know, without having quite a lot of training and practice and teaching as well from someone that really knows what they're doing. Not from me, you know, I'm not here to teach you to do it. We go right up into the edge. Do you see that triangle?
refocus at any time just by pressing the silver button. This one I'm going away from the edge and goes down to the edge and then back again slowly. Trying to get that go all the way from the edge and then out, rather than have the light line where the angle has changed. Really good now. That's good enough. Here, the wet, that wet material there is part of the abrasive, so it actually starts to cut better once you've got a little bit of that liquid, that kind of liquid. It's like a cutting compound. This is a bit too fine really, we should really have a couple of goes with an intermediate stone. It's not perfect, but it's good for doing twisting.